The reservation has been updated. The hostess said it politely, like she had no idea she had just shattered something. I stood there holding my overnight bag. My daughter Emma was beside me in a yellow coat, staring at the chandelier above the lobby. I asked the hostess to repeat herself. She glanced at the screen again, then at me, then back at the screen. The family suite was changed yesterday morning, ma'am. Your name was removed. There are moments when humiliation arrives quietly. Not with yelling. Not with chaos. Just one sentence. One look. One small pause between people. If you're here for the story, settle in for a minute. Maybe grab something warm to drink. Because what happened that weekend started in a luxury hotel lobby and ended with my mother crying into a microphone she was never supposed to touch. My name is Natalie Mercer. I'm 34. Architect. Widowed. Mother of one. 3 weeks ago, my family gathered in Aspen for my younger brother's engagement weekend. At least that's what I thought it was. But standing in that marble lobby, watching Emma clutch the sleeve of my coat while strangers avoided eye contact, I realized something else had been planned. Something deliberate. And the worst part? My mother was already watching from the balcony upstairs. She saw us arrive. And she turned away anyway. That was the first thing that told me this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was choreography. And I still hadn't seen the full performance yet. Emma noticed the silence before I did. Children usually do. They feel tension before adults admit it exists. She tugged gently on my hand. Mom, are we still sleeping here? The hostess looked uncomfortable. I smiled at Emma before answering. Yes, baby. Give me 1 second. Then I looked back at the screen. The reservation had originally been booked under my brother Caleb's wedding account. 3 rooms. 1 for Caleb and his fiancée Ava. 1 for my mother and stepfather. 1 for me and Emma. Except ours had been cancelled. Not downgraded. Removed. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. You should have checked with Caleb before assuming arrangements were still the same. No hello. No explanation. Just blame delivered softly enough to sound reasonable. I read it twice. Then 3 times. Because my mother had perfected that tone years ago. The tone that made cruelty sound administrative. Emma was still standing beside me with her backpack straps in both hands, waiting for an adult to make the room safe again. If you've ever been the family member expected to absorb every insult quietly, stay with me, because this part almost made me leave. And honestly, I think that's exactly what they wanted. The hostess cleared her throat carefully. There is 1 standard room still available. Standard. During a luxury engagement weekend my firm had partially financed. That detail mattered later. At the time, I just nodded, because the lobby upstairs had gone quiet, and I could feel my family watching us from the railing. Dinner started 40 minutes late. Nobody apologized. My mother hugged Emma first. Not me. That detail stayed with me longer than it should have. Caleb barely looked up from his phone when we sat down. Ava gave me the kind of smile women use when they already know something you don't. Then came the comments. Small ones. Careful ones. Layered gently enough to deny later. Still freelancing? That must be hard as a single mom. I don't know how you manage all that alone. My stepfather Leonard laughed into his wine glass. Nat's always preferred struggling independently. Everyone smiled politely. Emma sat beside me coloring on the paper menu. I kept my face neutral. Because the trick with families like mine is this. They escalate slowly. Like turning water hotter degree by degree. They want you reacting emotionally before you realize you're boiling. Then Ava mentioned the rehearsal venue. The ballroom is stunning, she said. Especially after the renovations. I looked up. What renovations? Silence. Tiny. Brief. But real. Caleb finally answered. Oh, Mom didn't tell you. That sentence changed the air completely. Because my mother suddenly reached for her wine. Too fast. Too carefully. And for the first time all evening, I noticed nobody at that table was surprised I didn't know something important. They had expected it. Which meant this had started long before the hotel room. And I was only now entering the middle of it. The ballroom belonged to the Ashbourne estate. Historic property. Private ownership. Invitation-only events. I knew the place well. because 6 years earlier, my late husband and I had designed its restoration plans together. Before he died, before the hospital bills, before everything collapsed into survival mode. Ava kept talking. Oh, Natalie would love it, Caleb. The architecture is gorgeous. I looked directly at my mother. You knew they booked Ashbourne? She dabbed her lips with a napkin. It slipped my mind. No, it didn't. Nothing ever slipped my mother's mind when status was involved. Then Leonard leaned back casually. Well, technically the estate belongs to the Whitmores now. Another pause. Another tiny shift in eye contact around the table. And suddenly I understood. The Whitmores. My husband's family. The same family who cut contact with Emma after Daniel died. The same family who quietly blamed me for mismanaging his legacy. Caleb avoided my eyes entirely. That's when Emma spoke softly beside me. Mommy, is this where Dad used to work? Every adult at the table went still. Not dramatic stillness. Controlled stillness. The dangerous kind. My mother answered before I could. Yes, sweetheart. Before things became complicated. Complicated. That word landed like a slap. And I realized something terrifying then. This engagement weekend wasn't just a celebration. It was a reunion. One I had never actually been invited to. And someone at that table was waiting for me to break first. I found the envelope under my hotel door at 1:12 in the morning. No name on it. Just my room number written in black ink. Emma was asleep beside the window, curled under 3 oversized blankets with one sock half hanging off her foot. I almost ignored the envelope. Almost. Inside was a single folded document. An event seating chart. Head table. Whitmore family. Caleb and Ava in the center. My mother beside Evelyn Whitmore. Leonard beside Charles Whitmore. And near the end, my name. Not Natalie Mercer. Natalie Hayes. My married name. With a small printed note underneath. Widow representative. I stared at those 2 words for a very long time. Representative. Like I wasn't a person anymore. Just a surviving attachment to someone important. Then I noticed something else. Emma's name wasn't listed anywhere. Not at the family table. Not at the reception tables. Nowhere. That's when my phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. You should ask why Evelyn requested your daughter excluded. I read it twice. Then a third time. Outside my window, snow was falling over Aspen in slow silence. Inside that hotel room, something old inside me finally stopped trying to make excuses for people. And for the first time that weekend, I stopped feeling hurt. I started paying attention instead. The rehearsal brunch the next morning was held inside the West Conservatory at Ashbourne Estate. Glass ceilings. White roses. String quartet. Everything designed to look effortless. That's usually how wealthy people display power. By pretending it isn't expensive. Emma stayed close beside me the entire morning. Closer than usual. She could feel it too now. The glances. The interruptions. The careful exclusions. Then Evelyn Whitmore arrived. My former mother-in-law. Tall. Elegant. Silver hair pinned perfectly into place. The room shifted around her immediately. She hugged Caleb. Kissed Ava. Touched my mother's arm warmly. Then finally looked at me. Natalie. No smile. Just recognition. Like seeing an old lawsuit. Emma brightened slightly. Grandma Evelyn. But Evelyn interrupted gently. There's a children's activity room downstairs, sweetheart. Emma's face fell instantly. And before I could answer, my mother added softly. That might be more appropriate. Appropriate. There it was again. That family language. Words polished smooth enough to hide the cruelty underneath. Emma looked at me carefully, waiting to see whether I would force her to leave. I knelt beside her chair and quietly said, You stay exactly where you're wanted. The entire table heard me. Nobody spoke afterward. But across the conservatory, I noticed an older man watching everything carefully from near the windows. And when our eyes met, he gave the smallest nod imaginable, like he had finally confirmed something. His name was Arthur Bellamy, Ashbourne Estate's original owner, or at least, the last one before the Whitmores acquired controlling interest after Daniel's death. I didn't recognize him at first. Age had softened him. But he recognized me immediately. "You designed the West Wing restoration," he said quietly. I nodded. "So you do remember." "I remember who saved this building." That sentence stayed with me, especially because nobody else at this wedding had acknowledged it once. Arthur asked if we could walk. Outside, snow covered the stone garden paths in thin white layers. Emma walked ahead of us holding a cup of hot chocolate with both hands. Arthur kept his voice calm. "Your husband trusted you with more than they told you." I stopped walking. "What does that mean?" He studied me carefully first, like he was deciding whether I was finally ready to hear something. Then he said, "The Whitmores never fully owned Ashbourne." Silence. Cold air. Snow drifting sideways between us. I genuinely thought I had misheard him. Arthur continued slowly. "Daniel protected his shares before he died." My heartbeat changed instantly. Not faster. Heavier. "There's a trust," Arthur said. "And your daughter is the primary beneficiary." I stared at him, then at Emma laughing quietly near the frozen fountain. Arthur lowered his voice further. "Your mother knows." That sentence hollowed something out inside me. Because betrayal from strangers hurts one way. But betrayal from people who watched you bury your husband, that changes the shape of trust permanently. Then Arthur handed me a small silver key. And suddenly, I understood why everyone had worked so hard to keep me emotionally unstable this entire weekend. They didn't want me asking questions. The engagement dinner started at 7 sharp. 200 guests. Crystal chandeliers. Black tuxedos. A string quartet near the staircase. And my mother standing proudly beside the microphone welcoming everyone to a celebration of family legacy. Funny word. Legacy. Especially when half the room was built on secrets. Emma sat beside me in a navy dress. Jennifer, my assistant back home, had overnight that morning after hearing my voice on the phone. She looked beautiful. Calm. Stronger than 8-year-olds should ever need to be. Halfway through dinner, Caleb stood for the family toast. Then my mother asked to say a few words too. Of course she did. She walked toward the microphone smiling carefully. Practiced. Controlled. But before she could speak, Arthur Bellamy entered the ballroom. The room shifted instantly. Even the Whitmores stood. Arthur approached the stage slowly, then handed a sealed folder directly to the event coordinator. "Read page 1 aloud." Confusion spread immediately. My mother went pale first. Then Evelyn. Then Leonard. The coordinator unfolded the document carefully and began reading. By transfer agreement dated March 14th, ownership authority of the Ashbourne Restoration Trust remains under protection of Emma Hayes until her 18th birthday. Silence swallowed the ballroom whole. The coordinator continued. With architectural stewardship rights permanently assigned to Natalie Hayes. My daughter looked up at me slowly, not fully understanding yet, but sensing something enormous had just changed. Across the ballroom, my mother's face had completely collapsed. Not from embarrassment, from realization. Because the building she spent the entire weekend using to diminish me had legally belonged to my daughter all along. Nobody yelled after that. Nobody needed to. The silence did everything for us. We left before dessert. Emma held my hand tightly walking through the snow outside Ashbourne Estate. Then she asked quietly, "Mom, does this mean Dad still protected us?" I looked back once at the glowing ballroom windows behind us, then down at my daughter. "Yes," I said softly. "He just needed the right moment to be heard."